So, welcome everyone. My name is Carolina Rossini, and I'm a professor here at the University of Massachusetts and the director for public interest technology programs at the PIT initiative at UMass. And I thank you all so much for joining us today in such an important panel. Artificial intelligence is no longer an abstraction, is actively shaping how we teach, conduct research, work, live, and apply for jobs. Thus, we are really honored to promote this a series of interdisciplinary conversations and practical engagements via our AI and Us Rethink Research, Work, and Society series. I'm going to share the link in the chat in a second. This is a partnership across various colleges and initiatives across UMass. And SBS, our school, is specifically committed to ensure that the next generation of students can navigate the era of artificial intelligence with critical thinking, ethical responsibility, and creativity. So this series will also inform our strategic plan and curricula moving forward. So we are very fortunate to count with wonderful experts from around the US and the world in this journey. So over the course of this year, we will explore topics such as teaching and learning with AI, research, future of work, and the societal impacts of AI. Today's keynote is a special one, Hilke. And to welcome our speaker, I give the word to my friend, Professor Juniper Katz, who is an assistant professor in the School of Public Policy and a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. Juniper.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, so I'm also a co-owner in a web services business, and I'm a close watcher of AI, so I'm thrilled to introduce Professor Hilke Schellmann. Professor Schellmann is an Emmy award-winning investigative reporter, associate professor of journalism at NYU, and author of The Algorithm: How AI Decides Who Gets Hired, Monitored, Promoted, and Fired, and Why We Need to Fight Back Now. In her groundbreaking book, Hilke exposes how AI systems are already making high-stakes decisions about workers' future, often in biased and opaque ways. Through whistleblower accounts, internal documents, and real-world testing, she demonstrates why algorithmic hiring may be one of the most significant emerging civil rights challenges of our time. Her talk, How AI is Changing Hiring and the World of Work, invites us to discuss how AI is affecting the world of work and our students. A few housekeeping announcements before we get going. The presentation is being recorded and will be shared on our AI and Us website. Professor Schellmann will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for about 15 minutes for questions and discussion. Please add your questions to the Zoom Q&A space, and I will help moderate those during our discussion time. Please join me, in theory, I guess, because we can't all see you, in welcoming Professor Hilke Schellmann.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I love, the topic AI and us, because, the last 7 years I've reported on this new world of hiring and also surveillance at work. And I'm really excited about the Q&A. I just wanted to start out with, sort of a couple things that I found out and share a couple videos and audio pieces of the tests that I've done and what I found out when I started digging into AI and hiring. I was hoping when I started out to find tools that make hiring better and maybe outperform humans because, as you may all know, like humans are pretty biased in hiring. We all have our like mental drawers where we put people in, and so I was like, wow, if machines take over, this will be, really wonderful. And as I started digging into it, I actually found a lot of problems, a couple ways of sunshine. And then, I realized I've chronicled all of that in my book. And along the way, before the book, I've published for The Guardian, The New York Times, MIT Tech Review, and others on the topic. So sort of the story grew and it snowballed. I also want to encourage, I always show my methods and I show how I kind of did this work. A couple of examples from that, because I want everyone to feel empowered to steal my methods and do some of this accountability work yourself. I think we often think that tech that is being put out, works and has no biases, and that's unfortunately not true. So I think we all need to do this work and hold tech companies accountable as well for the tools that they put out into the world. So taking a step back, I'm an investigative journalist, and our ethos is, and I'm sure you heard this many times, is like we hold the powerful accountable. And I would add that today, AI tools also hold a lot of power over people. And we need to expand our reporting from focusing on holding people accountable to also include AI tools. And of course, looking at the people building and deploying these systems, right? That's why I and others are holding AI tools accountable. And we think it's one of the most important civil rights issues of our time because we found a lot of bias and problems inside these tools, but they get glossed over by this sort of objective veneer of math. And I think a lot of people don't realize how problematic some of these tools are. So I want to take you on a little journey and tell you how I even found out, what is happening here. So what we see is companies have started using AI tool over the past few years because many of them get thousands or even millions of applications per year. And that started with the dawn of job platforms in the early aughts. LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Indeed, all of those big job platforms started, and they made hiring much easier, especially applying for applicants, right? Like you can search all of the jobs out there. They actually put them neatly together for you, and with like a couple of clicks, you can apply. And even now, we have AI tools that can apply for us, right? So it made it very easy. On the other side, companies say that since we gone digital basically with applications, they've begun inundated. So even before ChatGPT, IBM said they got around 5 million applications a year. Google says they get around 3 million. Goldman Sachs said that a few years ago for their summer internship program alone, they got over 220,000 applications. And now, with the introduction of ChatGPT, right, a lot of job applicants use ChatGPT to maybe generate a resume or a cover letter or help them with their applications. And the volume has gone up around 50% or so. So we have this problem like hiring manager, like there's thousands of resumes. I can't go through all of these people. So what do companies do? They turn to technological solutions, right? And there are a lot of vendors that say like, we have, a solution for you. And let me share my screen here. You can see that here's the hiring funnel. You can see that everywhere along the hiring funnels, companies use AI, but they're specifically very prevalent the moment you send in your resume, either through a company's website or you send it through LinkedIn. Often they use what we call applicant tracking systems, and they all have now AI built into it. Companies don't have,
Hilke,
yeah.
hi. I'm so sorry to
Hi.
interrupt you. Could you make that larger using the slideshow button there?
I can, but then my whole screen, is that easier?
Yes. Oh, but
That's
then
easier
you're
to
having
see.
trouble.
No problem. I'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, and so you see it all along the hiring funnel, but really in the screening stage, like we'll also talk about the interview stage. But at the screening stage, there's a lot of AI that is being used. And in fact, we know that 99% of Fortune 500 companies use algorithms in their hiring funnel. So it's actually now, to summarize all of this, what I'm trying to say is like if in the early stages of hiring, the rejection is now often done by machines. And when hiring managers and like recruiters have a small pool of people, like maybe 20, 30 people or so for a position, often a human still gets involved and does the hiring decision, right? We still have job interviews. And in fact, some people complain that they have 5 different rounds of job interviews. But the rejection is often done by AI, especially for large corporations, especially in finance, banking. We see these tools being used like really ubiquitously. We also see it for a lot of what the industry calls high volume, high turnover in retail, for example, fast food, large corporations use this. And one of the companies that I'm going to show a little video of that we profiled and looked at deeper is called HireVue. And they do one-way video interviews where no one is on the other side, and candidates are asked to like sort of answer questions and kind of like a job interview, but there's no one on the other side. And they said 3 years ago that they did 30 million job interviews, and they do about 10,000 or so a day. So the volume of this is like pretty vast. And I'm not going to totally talk. I can, in the Q&A, I'm happy to answer any questions about surveillance at work. That's also pretty big. We don't have official numbers, but the New York Times found out that 8 out of the 10 largest companies in the US surveil at least part of their workforce. You know, we know from other reporting that large companies use vendors that are checking employee Slack, email, Zoom, Teams, anything that, you know, is done on a work computer for employee sentiment infractions. You know, these AI claim to say that they can identify bullying, harassment, discrimination, pornography, nudity, and other sort of bad behaviors that may be flagged. I got to this topic, and you know that, and in this book, totally randomly, because people always ask me like, how do investigative journalists get to stories? And you know, we don't often, you know, I always thought like, oh, there's like somebody sitting next to the red phone, and then you know it rings, and somebody deep throat is calling and saying like, hey, I have a tip. But most of the time, like we are people in the world, and I got the tip from actually a Lyft driver. In 2017, I was at the time I was at a conference in Washington D.C. Had nothing to do with AI. It was with consumer lawyers, and I needed a ride from the conference to the train station. I called the Lyft and started talking to the driver and asked him how his day was, and he was just very like. He's like, yeah, you know what? I've had a really weird day. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, in the history of me taking Lyft and Uber rides, nobody has ever said that to me. And I was like, oh, yeah, how so? And he's like, I was just interviewed by a robot for a job. And I was like, what? So he had told me that he had applied for a baggage handler position at a local airport. And instead of a human being, a robot had called him that afternoon and asked him 3 questions. So I never heard of a job interviews conducted by robots, and I made a mental note to look into that. And one of the things I've looked into is one of the big companies here in the space, and it's called HireVue. So they do these one-way video interviews, and they're pretty ubiquitous in New York. Every time I ask my students, all of them have heard of them because they're just so ubiquitous. So I wanted to, at the time I was freelancing for the Wall Street Journal, and I wanted to know more about AI and hiring. So we started out, and we actually went to HireVue in Utah with my colleague, Jason Bellini. And I wanted to just show the 2-minute clip because I think it's sometimes easier to understand how AI works under the hood when you get that a little video clip. So let's see if we'll play the video here, and let me know if there's a technical problem, but we tested it and it should work.
We begin our exploration of the new world of hiring with a visit to the headquarters of one of the companies that's pushing the envelope, HireVue. Its artificial intelligence assessment tool is used by over 50 companies, including Unilever and Hilton, which both declined to comment. This, I'm told, is a typical digital interview for someone applying to become a customer service rep. It confronts me with several scenarios that, on the job, I might encounter.
If you can't help me resolve this right now, I'm going to take my business elsewhere.
I'm here to try to make things better. I go into this knowing something that HireVue acknowledges many job candidates potentially do not. That my responses are being assessed not by human beings, but by AI, analyzing my tone of voice, the clusters of words I use, and my micro expressions. So here's what's wild to me. The notion of micro expressions, is that what you're calling them?
It's the facial analysis software. It's capturing, if you think of facial movement, smiling, frowning, eyebrow movement, those are actual database points And they roll together to give certain emotions and traits and personality and thinking style things.
Here I am.
Yeah.
I just did the interview for a job as a customer support representative. How'd I do?
The first thing is we look at the AI score that's attached to it. And you can see that up here, you scored at a 37%.
That's pretty good, right?
No, that's out of 100, right? So you're kind of in the bottom third, if you will, in that job. So you'd be a low match, essentially.
My rating is the result of HireVue's AI comparing my responses to those of actual employees. Essentially, my performance is being compared. My voice, my words, my facial expressions against a company's highest performers.
So you think if an employer were to see that number, would I be written off most likely? Would it be filtered out of the process completely?
No, absolutely not, actually. What we would recommend is that the candidates could be rank ordered by that, but they still go and look at the different videos.
So you're telling me that everybody who goes through this, they get seen by someone?
Can be. They want to watch all the videos.
I'll stop it here, but you sort of get a sense what is under the hood maybe in some of these tools. And I think what's kind of interesting, like at the time, I was like, oh, who knew that like facial expression analysis is predictive of how good you'll be performing in a job. And so what we do as investigative journalists, right? It's like we trust but verify. So I started verifying this information, talking to experts in emotion and psychologists who've studied this for decades, and I was pretty surprised to learn that there's actually no science here. Like we don't have science with facial expressions in a job interview predict how good you'll be at a job. So what they do is they just sort of check the facial expression of applicants against facial expressions of people who are currently in the job, doing their job interviews. If you have similar facial expressions answering, any of these questions, then that means that you are predicted to perform well in a job. And I was just blown away by that, and I was like, "Wow, there's no science here. That is, really profoundly, we really need to look into this." And I think, sometimes it feels there is like very little change in the world, but I do have to say, like, the Wall Street Journal put out this video that we did, and then a year later, Drew Havel at the Washington Post reported on HireVue, and there was a legal complaint against the company, and they did stop using the facial expression analysis and later also the intonation of voice analysis, because there is also no science underneath that. So sometimes there is progress, although sometimes it also feels a little bit of a whack-a-mole, right? Because the company HireVue stopped using this particular way of analyzing people, but there are other little companies that has sprouted up. But I wanted to go on and talk a little bit about what I found when I started to look into resumes. So let me just share my screen again. I'm going to put it on the slideshow so you can see it. So I looked at these resume screeners that a lot of companies use when you send in your resumes through LinkedIn or a company's website. And I think what happens there is a lot of folks who come in, often lawyers or people who are sort of lawyer adjacent jobs, that come in when an AI vendor and a company talk about using a tool. Some companies do their due diligence and get lawyers and others to test the tools. And those lawyers told me that they found often very problematic keywords. One said in every tool he looked at, the other said in every fourth tool, and another one also said every tool had a problem. And so what they found, for example, is that if you had the first name Thomas or Elsie, you got more points. If you had certain locations on your resumes, and some examples was Canada and Syria, you were predicted to be more successful and you got more points for that. And obviously in the United States, the law is that you can't discriminate based on national origin. And this could be, a marker for national origin. It could be really problematic. I also found indicators of possible race-based discrimination, right? In some of the tools, Africa and African Americans was used as keywords. There's also another tool that predicted if you had the word baseball on your resume, you got more points, and if you had the word softball on your resume, you got fewer points. All kinds of problematic things, and I think that's an indication. What we see underneath the technology, what happens is that some companies they use the job description and the resumes that are coming in and ask an AI tool like how much overlap is there. That is doesn't isn't a very efficient tool because it turns out obviously job applicants are pretty smart and they understand that like if you have the keywords of the job description on your resume, then you often they'll be on the yes pile. So you only filter out like a very low percentage of folks with that. So you still have a massive amount of resumes. So a lot of companies they use sort of their own bespoke AI tools. And what they do is they give it a pile of resumes of people currently in the job or who've been identified as very successful employees, and tell the AI tool find out what these people have in common. So, and the AI tool probably did what it did best. It does a statistical analysis, and maybe there were a lot of Thomases in the pile, and it was statistically relevant and found out if your name is Thomas, you get a leg up, right? Obviously, for a hiring manager and a recruiter, you would know that obviously first names don't qualify you for anything, right? But an AI tool has no knowledge of that. It doesn't have an ethical code or anything like that. It's just a statistical analysis. So I think we've seen this again and again and again that we see these like causal effects that people think this is like a causal relation, right? This is predicted. Oh, Canada is meaningful because it's statistically relevant when it's probably just a random fluke. And we really shouldn't be using this in hiring, right? Even if it is predictive, we know that we shouldn't be using those kinds of things in hiring because they could be discriminatory, right? And I think that's where it's really problematic. And I think what's also problematic is that I found out that a lot of the AI vendors who build the tools often don't know how their tools work themselves because they use deep neural networks, and you don't need to know what that means, but what it means is that you give a tool training data and you check the results, but you don't necessarily know what goes inside, what happens inside of the computer when it makes these calculations. And I think that's very problematic if you do high risk decision making with these tools on humans, right? If you do this for my spam filter, it either works or not. And if the spam filter doesn't work, I'll find another one, right? Like it's very, very low stakes, I would argue. But this is really high stakes. And then what I also did is I tested the tools myself because I also wanted to feel like, how does it feel like taking these job interviews and if it feels kind of weird. And I think I've talked to so many job applicants and they felt it was like often very dehumanizing and they felt they couldn't ask a question. It wasn't a conversation and it really didn't work for them. So I did a lot of these interviews. And I also tested the tools themselves. And I did that because, for example, I did wonder in all of the one-way video interviews, the tool doesn't actually take the recording of the audio to make the calculations how predictive you are of being successful. What it does, it takes the audio recording, transcribes it in a transcription tool, and then based on the speech-to-text transcription, the AI software does their calculations. So I thought, like, what is with people like me who have an accent? What is with people who have a dialect? What is with people who have a speech disability? Do these transcription tools treat them fairly? Meaning, do they transcribe the words as well as for people who don't have a speech disability and who are native speakers? So I was pretty surprised that there wasn't a large scale study on this. So I'll talk about how we did this ourselves. But I did like a little testing. So I don't have a speech disability, so I didn't want to come up with one. So I thought, like, you know what? I'll just test the tool by speaking German to it because that's my native language. And for sure, I'll get an error message, right? Because I asked HireVue and other companies, like, what happens if somebody has a speech disability and the tool, quote unquote, cannot hear them well or cannot make sense of the information. And they said, oh, we have a threshold built in. Like every candidate has to get over a certain threshold. And if you don't meet that threshold, the hiring manager or the recruiter will get an error message and, a human will get in touch. So we made a podcast out of this and I just wanted to share like just 1 minute of it. There's no video, just a minute of where we tested this.
So, Hilke, you also tried speaking German to my interview, and you got a score there too.
I did get a score, but first I got a transcript of what I said.
Okay, so this is what it interpreted your words to be. And I'm just going to read from the transcript here, which does not make a lot of sense. So, humidity is a desk, a beat up. Sociology does it iron. Mind material, nematode adapt. Secure location, Masons the first half gamma their fortunes in.
Yep, it's gibberish.
Okay, what results did you get from this?
I was scored a 73% match for the role. Although I didn't speak a word of English, and the things I said in German had nothing to do with the questions I was asked or with the job itself.
Because you were reading a German Wikipedia page.
Yeah, actually, 73% is pretty high. And I wanted to make sure this language discovery was just not based on me speaking German. So one of the graduate students who I work with was kind enough to record herself in Chinese reading the same Wikipedia text. She scored 80%, and her English transcript is gibberish just like mine.
Right, bringing us back once again to this question of, are these machines making decisions based on scientific evidence, or are they just guessing?
Yep, that's the elephant in the room.
So we also did then what we called maybe, sort of a little deepfake test. Let me just go back to the slideshow. And so what we did is I was in front of the camera. I should say I was not in front of the camera. I was sitting next to the camera on the sidelines, and I used a deep fake of my voice. So I just typed up my answers, and I was surprised that the tool didn't even recognize that there's no one in front of the computer, there's no human speaking, and I still get a super high score. And that's actually kind of a known security risk. And the FBI put out a statement that like companies really need to level up and at least have like some, they call that liveliness check or something, to understand that there's even a human or somebody who looks like a human in front of the camera. So I feel like if I can do these tests, anyone can do these tests. And I think we have to really test these tools because, everywhere I looked and everywhere I tested, there were problems. I'm not a computer programmer. And if I can test these tools, anyone can, to understand how do they work and maybe how they are not working. Also my little German speaking test actually inspired a larger academic study that I was part of, where we actually thought like let's do this at a larger scale so we can like authoritatively say if these tools work or not. We tested about 13,000 audio recordings of people, about half of them with people who have aphasia, which is a speech disability a lot of people develop after having a stroke. And about half of the recordings were of people without a speech disability. And we ran that through all these transcription tools, and we did find that there is a statistical a significant difference between native English speakers without a speech disability and people with a speech disability, that their transcriptions way less accurate. And that is really concerning because, we assume that the companies say like, oh, this one tool fits them all and will democratize. Everyone will be screened the same way. And that is not actually the case, that leads to actually a fair measurement. Um, this could be a violation of the American with Disabilities Act. It could be really problematic. The last example I have is gamified assessments. So I'm just going to run this balloon game in the background so you sort of see what some people have to do to get employment. So here you see me. It's sort of, it's touted to be a video game. It's nothing like Fortnite or any of these really cool video games that we have today. It's more of an older age aesthetic. But here are the instructions that I'm reading, and then I'm starting to play this game where I have to blow up balloons. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Why do I have to blow up balloons, pump them up, and collect the money before they blow up? And I was like, what are they asking of me? Like I had all this questions in my mind. What does it have to do with the job? I'm so confused. Those were my questions. And then I played another game that very similar. It's called Hard Task and Easy Task. I'll also play that in the background so you see what I'm talking about. And I played it with Henry Claypool, who's actually quadriplegic. And he had a lot of questions when we played this game together, that he felt like, hey, wait a second, like what is happening here? Because you'll see in a second that you have to choose a hard or an easy task. And then the task is to hit the space bar as fast as possible. So he really had questions about what does it have to do with the job to hit the space bar as fast as possible, right? Like what kind of job is that? And then the second question he had, what is with people who have a motor disability and maybe can't hit the space bar as fast as possible, but is still super qualified for the job? This could be possible discrimination under American with Disabilities Act. You see in a second, how we have to hit the space bar as fast as possible. So there are all kinds of questions around these tools, and they're widely used. So I think what's also maybe interesting is that there's no central authority that regulates these games or any kind of these tools, right? Like companies don't have to tell the government or any entity what they're using. We just assume they're validated and they work because they're out in the marketplace, but that doesn't mean that's actually true. And I wanted to end my talk by saying that, I do this work because hiring matters. Like most of us need to make money to have a roof over our head and feed our children. And, a job is a big deal to most of us. A good job is worth its weight in gold because, often not only can we put a roof over our heads, our identity and happiness are often connected to it, right? So if I was a job applicant and I would find out that my application was rejected because I was not the most qualified candidate, I could live with that, maybe be a little sad. But if I find out I was rejected because of a faulty algorithm, I would be livid. And, I feel like that is not fair. So I wanted to thank you all for coming. I'm happy to talk about many more examples. And also I've learned along the way, maybe how we can calibrate resumes to make them machine readable. I'm happy to talk about that, or surveillance at work. I'm excited to hear all of your questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hilke. That was really, really fun to listen to. So we have a number of comments and a question or two. So I thought I would just share some of the comments so you get a sense for what people are talking about. Jesus Sepulveda Borrero says, I remember when I applied for one company and they used a STAR method for the interview, which I think maybe that was the facial recognition. I'm not sure exactly what the STAR method is, but they mentioned that.
I don't think it's that. I think it's the STAR method for interviews is usually like a structured interview where you ask about specific task and action. Like sort of instead of asking like, um, are you a team player? I mean, in the history of job interviews, I'm sure no one has ever said no. But you asked sort of like, so tell me about a hard time at work where it was hard to work in a team. How did you solve that question? And I think that happens a whole lot. And I think hiring managers are also aware that, like, humans are smart, right? Like interviews are interesting, they're helpful, but they're not very predictive of how good you'll be at the job because it's about talking about a job. And it's not actually doing the job. I mean, to no one's surprise, one of the highest validation rates in hiring is actually having humans do the job to understand how good they will be at it. It's just very cumbersome and not very efficient for companies to hire, right, like 100 people and then let 99 go after the end of the month or after 2 months. So that doesn't work. But I do think that like maybe what I found out is that the automation of these processes that we have done for a very long time in hiring are actually the processes itself are often flawed, and we just digitize them and we brought in like different bias and stuff that I talked about. But we actually have to rethink a lot of these things. Like I do think there is a place for interviews, but we also should have a lot more other assessments and really assess people on like what is it that you need for the job, and can we assess you on like the 2 or 3 things that matter most versus have you talk about it, right? Because we have a lot of the it's called confidence versus competence, that some people they come off as very confident. You're like, wow, they really seem to be, they're going to be great at this because look how confident they are. That doesn't mean they're competent. So there's all kinds
So
of
true.
problems. Thank you for sharing that comment. Yeah.
Roger Taylor mentions that they were trained in facial actio coding system, which the software is using, and this is a serious ethical issue since microexpressions are unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole lot of ethical problems with using facial expression analysis, right? And there's also a couple of things that I learned that the science actually is more contested than the companies that built these software tools let us believe. So they say, for example, that like most humans have the same 5 or so facial expressions, that like we all smile, then we all happy. Obviously, even with smiling, right? That's often that may be true for most of the time, but often it's not, right? I've been in so many job interviews where I've smiled and I was zero happy. I just wanted to make a connection. Like I just was like, okay. So I think you sort of get that it's not always like the emotion underneath is not always the same for people. And I think that's sort of another problem here. Also, that there's no science on what facial expressions you need for a job. So,
Right, right, how that relates to performance. Yeah, I mean, that's just really mind-boggling, the lack of underlying reasoning for the tests that you were showing. Professor Justin Gross asks, what organizations are pursuing new regulations to limit how AI is used in employment, criminal justice, or other high-stakes settings? And are they challenging these practices under current laws?
yeah.
And then there was one addendum to that, which is, are any attempting to develop something like an AI-related Bill of Rights?
Yeah. There was an AI Bill of Rights that the Biden administration has put out, but those are all like, they're sort of like, this is what we should do, right? They weren't law, they weren't codified into law, and I think what we're seeing on the federal level is there isn't a whole lot of appetite to regulate these kinds of tools. And so what we see is like sort of a patchwork emerging, and that was already under the Biden administration, that some states like sort of acted pretty quickly, some states are not acting at all. And then we have also local jurisdictions that are doing law or trying to pass laws. We have a law in New York City that actually I think was very well intentioned it doesn't work because the companies themselves get to decide how much AI they use in decision making and if they need to audit their own tools. And there's also we haven't seen any enforcement of the law. So we see sort of this like a little bit of a patchwork, which is kind of problematic. But we see a lot of civil society groups pushing for this. And I think we've seen, a couple months ago when sort of on the federal level, there was this AI bill that was being discussed that like states and other jurisdictions couldn't actually litigate against AI tools for so and so many years. And that was almost unanimously pushed out. So I think we see some sense here and some idea we need to regulate it, but we don't see enough. I think what we are hoping is the EU and the European Union, they started an AI Act, but actually for the first time they put hiring and surveillance at work as one of the high risk areas, because I think it gets always forgotten, right? We think about predictive policing and all other high stakes areas. Very important to talk about that and think about that. But hiring always was less interesting to people. I think also because there is a lot of we're so used to that so many people apply and we get rejected, right? Like most job applicants that I spoke to never even thought it could be an algorithm, right? They were like, I don't know, I just wasn't the most qualified. They never thought, oh, it could be a faulty algorithm. So I think those are kind of the problematic things. And the EU AI Act also outlawed the facial expression analysis and hiring. They demanded as a high risk. So sometimes the hope is they regulate it in the EU. Will this have a spillover effect, right? We haven't seen that, but hopefully it will. That there will be more appetite to regulate, and maybe some of these companies will by themselves stop using some of this kind of problematic software because they don't want to build different tools for different jurisdictions, right?
Right. And everything you're saying just makes me think that these companies are opening themselves up to a lot of liability. I'm actually surprised that the attorneys at these corporations, maybe they didn't even review. I don't know. It just seems like
Yeah,
they
I
could
mean,
be sued.
I'm always surprised too because HR is seen as like really risk averse, but I think
Yeah.
what is often the overarching thing that happens is like in most companies, HR is seen as a cost center, right? It doesn't make money. We have to pay for it, and if we can save money, we will do that. And then, and everyone, a lot of people think like, oh, technology is going to save us money, right? So they want to buy the software, so they have to pay fewer employees, or they hire faster, right? That's often another reason. And there isn't a whole lot of thought, and it's not. If you want to save money, you're not going to then hire two more people to supervise these systems, right? And I think there's also the problem is like the vendors themselves often don't know how decisions are made inside their own software. The companies that use it don't know that either. They actually, in fact, we see some auditing of results, and usually the AI vendors that build the software do that for a lot of companies.